What are you doing in my backyard? Well, it's as good a time as any because I was just rehearsing this speech that I have to give about nonverbal communication, and I'll practice it on you, if that's all right. Yeah? Okay. So, this is my presentation about nonverbal communication. 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 You get the idea. This is my presentation about nonverbal communication. And even though the words that came out of my mouth every time I just did that were the same, the meanings were very different. And that happens in every single interaction we have. Now, the experts say about 75 to 80% of our communication is nonverbal. That means that the majority of what you say to the people that you interact with doesn't come out of your mouth. Nonverbal communication is transmitting information from one person to another without speaking. Now, when we develop as children, the first thing that we're able to do is recognize facial expressions. Okay? And that's actually one of the big things with autism is that it's really hard for them to recognize facial expressions. And it's really hard for them to communicate because so much of our communication is nonverbal. So when children develop, they develop nonverbally. And in some cultures, like the Native American culture, nonverbal communication is very heavily presented over actual words and verbal communication. Now, nonverbal communication it encompasses a lot of things. So the ones we're going to talk about are body language, appearance, distance, physical distance between people, the environment, touch, eye contact, the nonverbal elements of speech, and how nonverbal communication is even in the things that we don't say. Now, just as an introduction, we see nonverbal communication everywhere, every day, in every interaction we have with people. You turn on the TV, you're going to see Jersey Shore. Jersey Shore comes on. You see the guys when they get angry at each other, they puff up, and they get those air lats, and they kind of like, what you want? You want to go? You want to go, bro? It's called crabbing. It's a very basic form of nonverbal communication. And if you were to turn on the Discovery Channel and watch a thing about monkeys, you would see that they communicate a lot the same way. It's all about their facial expressions, how they position themselves around the other monkeys, things like that. Now, people experience the majority of their world through their eyes. Something like 89% of our perception is visual. So that gives you a clue why nonverbal communication is so important. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is body language. Body language is basically wearing your thoughts and your feelings, your emotions, right on your sleeve, right where everyone can see them. Gestures, posture, facial expressions. Think about a dog. If you had a really angry dog or scared dog, threatened dog, and they pull their lips back and they show their teeth, and they put their ears back so they can't get torn off, they squint in their eyes to protect them, and that tells you that that dog is agitated and you should not mess with that dog. Now think about a happy dog, like when you just came home after a long day and you've been gone forever because he counted, and his ears are floppy and his tongue's hanging out and his eyes are wide and he's just looking at you like you're the best thing since sliced bread. Dogs don't need to talk to communicate with us, and that's the essence of nonverbal communication. Now, appearance. Some people might call it shallow, but we have things called stereotypes in our society. And if I say something like jock or cheerleader, goth, businessman, anything like that, it pops an image into your head. And the stereotype that we're going for in EMS is professional, because professional is also a stereotype. So we want to be presenting ourselves as professionals so that the people that we're treating can trust us They can give us personal, private information and know that we're not going to misuse it. And they can be at their most vulnerable with us. So dress for it. Wear your uniform properly. Make sure your hair is neat. If you're allowed to have facial hair, keep it nice and trimmed. And bad breath, not good nonverbal communication. So break out that Listerine. Now, distance. 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 Are you uncomfortable yet? That is what distance does. Now, distance varies a lot between cultures. In Western culture, we usually keep about 2 to 3 feet away from each other. But in another culture, say Japan, it wouldn't be strange for you to get on the train and be right there with someone. And you're going to be perfectly quiet right there, standing right next to them the whole ride. And they're not uncomfortable with that because that's how their culture is. Now, when we care for patients, we're going to have to be all up in their business. Okay? That distance is going to go away. But when they don't need anything, when you've done everything that you can, when you're just transporting them between taking sets of vitals, sit on the bench. I mean, don't laze around, but sit on the bench. Give them a little bit of space, okay? And if they need something, wait for them to invite you into their space if it's not an emergent situation. Now, your environment. I know what you're thinking. How do I have any control over the environment? You know, we get called to some hoarder's house. We have to go in there with the little aisleways and none of the light bulbs work. But there is some control we have. Say you walk in to a scene where a patient has been incapacitated for a while and they're sitting there laying in the dark with a broken hip, freaking out. You turn on that light, you improve the environment, and you can improve your communication. Now, when you get them out to the ambulance, you've got a lot of opportunities because you completely control that environment. If you've got a patient with a headache or a migraine, you can dim the lights for them. If they're cold, you can warm them up. If they're hot, you can cool them down. You can tailor that environment to offer the best communication and care for your patient. Touch. Touch. Touch is a very intimate thing. And it is. Touch is very intimate, especially in our culture. But we're going to have to touch patients. That's part of the job. And touch can actually be very soothing to patients who are, really in need. But you have to read the patient. And of course, when you touch someone in an intimate place, touch with the back of the hand, respectful, okay? You don't want to do light tickling touches. You don't want to grab them so hard that you're going to hurt them. You want to be nice and firm, professional, and courteous. Now, eye contact. Have you ever talked to someone that stared at you unblinkingly, like they were some kind of reptile that never had to blink? Ugh. It's unnerving, right? So you want to make sure that you're not just staring at your patient. But eye contact is very important because it lets people know that we're listening to them and that we care about them. So even if you've got to untangle the 12 lead because the last person on your ambulance had no idea what they were doing and, oh my God, I don't want to have to do, look at your patient when they talk to you. Untangle the cords, look at your patient. Let them know that you're absorbing their information, that you care about the information they're giving them, and that you care about them. And you can also read the amount of eye contact that someone's willing to make. Someone who's depressed, someone with autism, there are a lot of people who aren't going to want to make eye contact, and that can tell you something about their condition. So you always want to pay attention to not just what you're doing, but what they're doing as far as nonverbal communication goes. Now, nonverbal speech. It might sound like an oxymoron, like jumbo shrimp, something like that, but it's not. We say more than just words when we talk. We've got a tone, a rate, pitch, volume, rhythm, and Now, there are these things called chronemics. And basically what that is your timing, the time between your words. Okay? Like Miles Davis once said, it's not the notes you play, it's the space in between. Now, the space in between your notes, or your words in this case, they have a lot of meaning. Okay? The tempo that you speak has a lot of meaning. Go watch Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream or Mountaintop speech and watch how he uses silence to convey heavy feelings. He gives you time to mull them over, to let the gravity of the situation sink in. Right? Now, we're not making dramatic speeches to patients, but the pauses in our speech can tell them a lot. If someone asks, what's going on with my mom? And you go, she's totally going to be fine. Either you've got something that you don't want to tell them, or something else horrible is happening. Or you just don't know what you're doing. None of those are things that we want to communicate to our patients or their families. Now, I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's really important. For healthcare providers, nonverbal communication is absolutely key. All right? You're building trust and rapport. You have to have a bedside manner, even though we're in an ambulance. You have to have a bedside manner with your patients. Otherwise, they're not going to tell you the important things. They're not going to tell you where it hurts. They're not going to tell you how bad it hurts. They're not going to tell you about the embarrassing thing, that they've been pooping blood for 5 days. They're not going to tell you because they don't trust you. They think you're going to make fun of them. They think you're not going to take them seriously. That leads to bad patient care, and we're all about patient care. So make sure that you're paying attention to your nonverbal cues and that you're giving your patients the best quality of care you can. Some other notes. Depressed patients, obese patients, and opioid addicts have a harder time picking up nonverbal cues. Now, stimulant users, people with bipolar disorder, and things like that are more receptive, so you have to be extra careful, and they might even see things that you didn't mean or that weren't even there. Now, in conclusion, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you ask me about this outside of this video, I'll say it again. It's all about care and compassion, and that stems from good communication. The majority of what you say does not come out of your mouth. It's important to know. And if you want to have more experience with this, you can grab a family member or a friend or a stranger on the street if they're receptive to it, and play what I like to call emotional charades. Which is charades, only instead of trying to communicate that there's a monkey on an airplane, you just try to communicate an emotion without using any words. And you'd be amazed how easy it is. It's not like regular charades. Because if you come up to someone and you frown and you make your eyes tight, and it just looks like you are hurting, they'll be able to tell that you're sad or that you're in pain. If you smile, like everything's fantastic forever, then they're gonna know you're happy. And if you, they're gonna know that something gross just went in your mouth or you saw it. So, nonverbal communication. It's incredibly important. It's the majority of how we communicate. And get out of my backyard. Thank you.